See if this works. All right, here we go. Now we're live. All right, we figured it out. Thank you for everyone for bearing with us there. Little hiccups and whatnot, but if we've learned anything over these past couple weeks, you learn to roll with the punches and you take whatever is given to you. So resetting things here, I'm Alex Jankowski, joined by John Wagner, co-owner and vineyard manager here at Wagner Vineyards. And on top of everything, we wanted to take a couple seconds just to thank everybody for the support that we've had over these past couple really unprecedented weeks. We're still open for wine to be picked up here at the winery from 12 to 4, 7 days a week. Our WagnerVineyards.com store is open 24/7 for shipping to 19 states. Some discounts apply as well on orders of 6, 12, and 24. But what we really wanted to do is just take a moment here and relax a little bit of a distraction for everybody, given what's been going on in the news these past couple weeks. So hope you're joining us from all over the country. Let us know where you're watching from. Let us know what you might be drinking tonight, Wagner or otherwise. We'll give you a shout out. Let us know of any questions you might have about the operation here, about wine in general. We're here to answer them. We're also here, though, to talk a little bit about a flagship wine here at Wagner Vineyards, and that would be the 2017 Riesling Dry, a wine that was really at the forefront of what was a banner year, 40th anniversary last year for Wagner, and this wine really shone. It was the best white wine at the New York Wine Classic. In 2020 so far, TechSom Awards gave it a judge's medal. San Francisco Chronicle gave it a gold as well. So really a phenomenal wine. So I want to turn the floor over to the man who makes that wine possible here, John Wagner. Talk a little bit about Riesling here in the Finger Lakes, Riesling at Wagner. What's that history and what's the progression been like over these past 40 years?
Yeah, so I'll back up a little bit. My family has grown grapes here on the east side of Seneca Lake for 5 generations. So we got a long history of growing fruit here on this site. My father, Bill Wagner, started the winery. We started construction in '76. We opened in '79. In 1978, he planted his first Riesling block, which we still farm today. That block is over 40 years old. It's got some very unique flavors, and that's potentially one of the oldest continuing Riesling blocks in the Finger Lakes. So for the first 15 years that the winery was in existence, all of our Riesling wines came from that one block of grapes. It's 8 acres. We were making at that point 3 or 4 different Rieslings, but they had a very similar taste profile. And then about 25 years ago, we really began to realize the potential, the versatility of Riesling, how it grew on our site. We have a very nice site here on the east side of Seneca Lake with the temperature moderating effect of Seneca Lake. So we began to plant differing blocks of Riesling on our farm. We currently have 6 different Riesling blocks, aging anywhere from the heritage block that's over 40 years old into our youngest Riesling block is 6 years old. They're on different elevation sites. So we have lower elevation, 700 feet above sea level. We have the upper level vineyards are about 1,000 feet above sea level. We've planted different clones of Riesling on different root stocks. So we now have a lot of different tools in the toolbox, and we are growing those grapes quite a bit differently in 2020 than we were back 40 years ago.
Yeah, and Riesling is such an interesting grape in that you can pick it at different sweetness levels. You can do a lot of things with it, and their trends go up and down, right? Sweet Riesling, sometimes people will say, oh, I don't drink Riesling because it's always too sweet. Well, that's not always the case. We can make sweet Riesling, and Wagner makes a pretty darn good select Riesling as well, and semi-dry. So when you're looking to cater to that changing taste, what evolution have you seen? What trends have you seen come and go? Where are we now with Riesling where we might not have been 20 years ago?
Yeah, so we still hear the stereotype, I don't like Riesling. And I say, well, why don't you like Riesling? Well, they're too sweet. And I say, well, Riesling can be sweet. It can be made in dessert style. It can also be made bone dry. We make a single vineyard Kaywood East that is extremely dry, nearly bone dry. So we love the grape because of the versatility of it. And we were on a site here where the lake also helps us near harvest because we get a cooling effect in the evening. That cooling effect in the evening helps us preserve some of the acidity in the Riesling grape. So that's one of the reasons you see a lot of world-class Rieslings grown in cool climate regions, and not so much in hot climate regions, because those warm nights actually draw a lot of that acidity down, and you don't have enough acidity to have some structure and some backbone to the wine. So we've definitely seen, when we started really getting serious about Riesling 25, 30 years ago and realizing it was the signature variety of the Finger Lakes, we've definitely seen taste go from semi-dry to semi-sweet to a definite progression and a migration towards drier Rieslings. I think people are realizing that it is the ultimate food wine. I really enjoy dry Riesling with food, and it just complements so many different dishes. And the dry Rieslings are a little more difficult to make because when you make a sweeter Riesling, the sweetness in the wine kind of rounds out the mouthfeel,
right?
Makes it a little fuller. And when we're making the dry, we certainly have to have all our ducks in a row and really have to have the flavors in there. Yeah. So
can't hide behind the sweetness.
No, and the flavors are made in the vineyard. And I think that's where our strength is, because we're doing an awful lot of things to really push the ripeness of this variety and all of our vinifera. So we grow 20 different varieties of grapes. Riesling is by far our most widely planted variety. We have over 60 acres of Riesling, so we do have a lot of eggs in one basket, but we believe in it 1,000%. We think it is we are sitting on one of the world-class sites to grow Riesling.
Well, start to think about your favorite food pairings, because I want to give a couple shout outs to people who have been commenting. I also want to know, what is your favorite, you watching, what is your favorite pairing with Riesling? Like I said, it doesn't have to be Wagner, doesn't have to be dry necessarily, but what do you like to pair with? Carmela out there from the Finger Lakes Wine Alliance, thank you for checking in. Finger Lakes Wine Country also checking in. Megan's got her Wagner dry Riesling in her Wagner glass. Great to see. Victor also out in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Anyone else from out of state here watching so far? Let us know. I'd be remiss if I didn't say hi, Mom. My mom checking in from Boston, New York. Hi, Mom. How you doing? Rich touting the Kaywood East as well. And Shirley coming in. Her favorite is the semi-dry. And another one that's just, it finds that balance between sweetness and you still get that acidity that just makes Riesling so versatile. Christy Wentz shouting out dumplings as her favorite Riesling pairing. So John, the floor is yours. Talk to me a little bit about what you like to pair with both the dry Riesling and maybe some other Rieslings as well. Yeah,
so I love salmon on the grill with dry Riesling. I can't think of a better pairing. It's incredible. I love salmon. I eat it all the time over the grill and with a glass of dry Riesling. My father was a big proponent of wine with food, and it really shines. And I think it's great with seafood, any kind of salads in the summer. In the wintertime, if I'm having red meat, it's not usually my go-to, but I'll have a glass before dinner.
Sure.
If I was going to a dinner party and I wasn't sure kind of what type of wine people liked, semi-dry Riesling is always my go-to. Really fruit forward, not overly sweet. Our semi is a true semi-dry Riesling. So hand me the bottle there, Alex. So we, on the back of all of our bottles of wine, you'll see the IRF scale. And we used a sweetness scale prior to the IRF coming out, but when the IRF came out with that scale, we decided to adopt that. We use it for all of our Rieslings. So if you're out of state, Our wines are distributed in a lot of states. If you pick up a bottle of Riesling off a store shelf and you're not sure how sweet it is, flip it around, look at that IRF scale. That little pointer on the back will tell you dry, medium sweet, or sweet. And it's a great system, and it kind of helps us dispel that myth that all Rieslings are sweet, because they certainly aren't. And it's an amazing dry wine. We have learned a lot about growing Riesling. Back in the late 70s when we planted it, we grew it just like every other variety of grape that we had grown for decades. So that meant canes were trained up on a high wire. The shoots were non-positioned. So that means as they grew, they sprawled to the ground, and the canopy actually shades the fruit. So when you get shaded fruit, you get a whole host of problems. You get poor flavor development. You get, after a rain, the fruit doesn't dry out as quickly, and you can get more incidence for disease in there as well. So we slowly migrated to shoot position systems, where we trained the fruiting canes on lower wires out on our trellis, and through the use of movable catch wires, we put the shoots where we wanted to, which was, in our first iteration, was vertical shoot positioning. So shoots positioned vertically upward and with a defined fruit zone down below that. So that was a step in the right direction. We had a defined fruit zone that we could do different things to, including leaf removal to expose the fruit. But we found after a decade or so that there was some limitations to vertical shoot positioning, because there was some shading just because we were putting leaves on top of other leaves.
Okay. So
about 15 years ago, we converted all of our vinifera to what's called a Scott Henry training system, named after a grower in Oregon that came up with it. And instead of training everything vertically upward like that.
As we grow these out, we'll get graphic department to work on everything.
You don't like my hands?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's doing great right now, but it can be so much better.
So we divide the canopy. So we have a tier of shoots that go vertically downward and a tier of shoots that go vertically upward. And what that does is it about doubles the size of the canopy that we can intercept sunlight with. Mm-hmm. And it really opens up a nice fruit zone. And what we get with that is super flavor development. So we saw a huge progression as we went from 40 years ago growing vinifera like we did our French-American hybrids with shaded fruit, picking not always when the grapes were at the peak of ripeness, but picking because we had to, because we might have disease pressure in the vineyard. So now our goal is to really open the canopy up, get that fruit zone out there. We do early leaf removal right over the fruit zone. That's really, really key, is getting the sunlight on the clusters of fruit early. Pays huge dividends for us. It's very labor intensive to do it, but we get it done early. A lot of handwork going through the vineyard and positioning those shoots, because the vine doesn't want to necessarily grow vertically upward and vertically downward at the same time. So it's a lot of manipulation by hand through those catch wires to really get that canopy in that vertical plane. But when we do that, it really it's able to capture a lot of sunlight and really push the ripeness. So
yeah, let's back up a little bit there, because you mentioned something that I think is very interesting, not so much in the vineyard, more of a philosophical discussion about wine and pairing with food. And we see a lot of comments coming through, everyone giving their favorite pairings, a lot of which sound delicious. We don't have anything right here in front of us.
We're very hungry.
But, spicy things, pad thai, tofu salad, spiced tofu salad, things like that, really help cut the acidity from the Riesling, help cut through that spiciness. But the idea that wine is meant to be paired with food is a little bit more of a European thought than it might be here in America. Here in America, wine is more marketed and just thought about as its own separate thing. It's what you're drinking tonight. It's what you're having with you, not necessarily pairing it with food. Is that something that's kind of always in the mind here at Wagner, that, when we're making a wine, when we're crafting it, when we're thinking about it, we have food in mind with it?
Yeah, we certainly do try to have some food pairing suggestions with each wine. But we're constantly really surprised with what people come up with. And oftentimes we'll try those food pairings that people suggest and find out, oh, that works too, you know? And so I wouldn't say that we have a food in mind when we're making a certain wine, but we make the wine. We feel we make it the highest quality we can make it, the best representation for that particular vintage. One thing we should say, all of our wines at Wagner are estate bottle. And what does that mean? So that term is you'll see it on wine all the time. It means we grow every single grape that goes into the wines that we sell here in the winery. So that's a huge philosophical commitment that we make. We feel we have the best control over those grapes. We know there's a lot of great growers in the region. It's not that we have anything against buying fruit from those growers. We just feel like we want to celebrate what we can do on this little piece of property that we have here on the east side of Seneca Lake. So no, I think we try to get the grapes as ripe as we can get them for any particular vintage. And then we do a lot of experimentation, which people might not think, hey, it's a winery that's 40 years old. Right. So let's talk a little bit about, going from that one original Riesling block that we had 40 years ago to now having 6 with multiple clones and various blocks and everything. So we grow 20 different varieties of grapes on the farm, and our harvest starts in late August and it runs all the way through September, October, and oftentimes we'll go a little bit into November. So we get a lot of those early season varieties are harvested, and we have Riesling still hanging. Riesling is a late season variety. Usually about October 10th to 15th would be when we start to harvest Riesling, and we'll go all the way through October into early November if we have to. So one of the things that's a little tough with Riesling is it's thin-skinned. So it is susceptible to certain things, botrytis, which can be really great if it's just straight, clean botrytis. But
botrytis being noble rot.
Yeah,
right?
So it's a phenomena that Riesling get where the berries go from that golden, the skins begin to break down and turn brown, and the botrytis can add a lot of character. You'll see a lot of botrytis character in late harvest dessert wines or ice wines.
Kind of where you get that honeyed flavor.
Yeah. So we will work some of that into our ice wine and our Riesling Select, but it's really something that we don't have too much of a component in our dry. So in order to keep the botrytis at bay, we're really opening that canopy up, making sure the fruit dries out after rain events, and a lot of handwork. So in certain vintages in 18, we had an additional pass that we had to go through because we had so much rain in 18, so we had to drop some fruit. So when we actually get to harvest, we're faced with bringing in over 60 acres of one variety of fruit within a matter of 10 days. So how do we do that? How do we accomplish that? Well, our philosophy is we do our handwork during the growing season to make everything uniform and to maximize the hang time. The longer that fruit can hang out there, the more complex flavor development that it can get. So then when it's go time, we have a state-of-the-art mechanical grape harvester made in France. It's a Gregoire, and it's got a very delicate picking mechanism on it, bow rods that shake the canopy. So when grapes are ripe, they want to come off the stems. You can go out and actually shake the trellis wire, and you'll see berries start to rattle off the clusters, and that's one of our final checks. So we mechanically harvest the fruit. One of the unique features of this machine, it's got onboard destemming, so it actually destems the fruit right in the vineyard. The stems get deposited back on the vineyard floor and are composted right there in the vineyard. So it really is delivering the cleanest fruit that we've ever been able to bring into the winery. And one of the benefits, the big benefits of mechanically harvesting Riesling is we can get the fruit at the temperature we want to get it at. Right. So we do a lot of night harvesting. We like to bring in Riesling when it's nice and cool. This opens up that potential. We can go out at night when it's 45 degrees out, and we can harvest the fruit, bring it in. It's all destemmed, and it is perfect to get it cool. No degradation in flavors or quality on the harvesting end. So we've really seen a huge increase in quality when we've been able to employ that picking mechanism in there and get the stems right out initially.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of juice sitting in contact with those stems after they are harvested.
A little bit of housekeeping here, just on one comment that I know saw come in earlier, Richard wanting to know if there's any Riesling coming out in this upcoming club shipment that we have coming out in April. And we're still finalizing things a little bit, but let you guys in who are watching on a little secret. The 18 semi-dry will be released in that club shipment. So you'll at least be getting that one. You might get another Riesling there as well as we kind of finalize that list. So definitely be on the lookout for that. Shouts out to Karen checking in from New Jersey. Loves to come up for All to Be weekend. We're gonna love to have people back in this octagon here, let me tell you, and outside as well. It's a nice sunny day outside, and it'd be perfect to be able to bring everyone back in. And so much of what we're doing around the winery right now is getting ready for when that can happen again. Where everybody who's still here is going through taking care of some projects that fall by the wayside when we have other people coming in, but we're going to be ready to roll, and that's going to be very, very exciting and welcoming when we can have start welcoming guests back in again.
Everything is full speed ahead on the production side. The grapes don't know anything about this pandemic, so we're on the final stages of pruning. We have about 20 acres left to prune. We have a total. We farm about 215 acres of grapes, so we're on the final. My guys are real happy that we're going to be done pruning. It's a 6-month endeavor, and we're out there in wind, sun. I got my winter sunburn. Not too many people have that. It's not from my trip to Florida. It's from being out pruning vines. So,
yeah, real quick here. So, got a question from Lori that we'll get to real soon. Dave, though, also wants to know when our reserve Pinot Noir will be available again. When weather tells us it'll be available again, right? We hold our reserve Pinot Noir to a level where it just needs to be the right kind of growing season, right? And then
it's tough from a business standpoint to have Pinot Noir in the winery in barrel and look at it and say we don't feel it's going to make reserve. So we would rather run out of a vintage and not have a follow-up vintage than to put something in the bottle that we don't feel is up to our reserve standards. So as soon as we have the quality to make a reserve again, it will be out there. We had some beautiful reds from 16, long, hot growing season. We're going to talk a little bit about how that led into the 17 growing vintage for the Riesling, but 16 super vintage for reds, and we still have some 16s available. We are now librarying a lot more wine as we get down to the end of a vintage, which is something we never did really 30 years ago. We would kind of just sell every case we had and then start the next vintage. So now we're really recognizing some of the potential that these wines have to age. So back 15 years ago, if your dry Riesling was a vintage back or 2 vintages back, people thought there was something wrong with it. Why isn't this the 2019 Riesling? Right now, it's like, well, they age and they get better. And the more we've been able to show that, and people are realizing that now, it really is opening up a whole new potential for aging Riesling. We've got. I opened up a bottle a couple of years ago that was almost 40 years old, and it was still drinkable. It had gone a little bit past its prime. The cork closure sometimes will give up before that period of time has elapsed. So that's one thing to consider. One of the things you guys will notice, about 12 years ago, we switched to Stelvin closure on our Riesling. So we got a few questions from some of our long-term customers. And they're like, oh, why did you switch to a screw cap? And we had done some blind testing here on a bunch of different wines, and we proved it to ourselves that we really liked the aging potential of especially our aromatic whites under Stelvin better than we did under cork. And that's not a slight on cork at all. We still use cork on all our dry red vinifera. So about 12 years ago, we purchased equipment that would enable us to either use a Stelvin closure or a cork. So it is the final decision that the winemaking team makes at the end after the wine is bottle ready. We decide on the packaging, and it is not a shortcut by any means. It actually costs us more money to put a Stelvin onto a Stelvin outfitted bottle than it does a cork in a cork outfitted bottle. So for us, it was looking to make sure every single bottle that you get has got the same quality, and there's no differences in quality for that. So it's been a big step forward for us. We really think the aging potential has been extended with that closure. So,
and talking about that 2016 Pinot Reserve as well, that's another reason to join the Cellar Club, is because as we're keeping more and more library wines, we're able to include those in some of those shipments as well. So a couple of years down the road, you might see the 2016 reappear. And if you're a member of the OCC Cellar Club, you'll be able to get that as well. So I want to get back to this question from Lori Ellen Ward. Hi, Lori. Hope well as well. Wanting to know, how do you know what the perfect go time is? And I assume this is talking about harvesting. And maybe we can start to tie this into 2017 and the growing season. In 2017, when did you know it was go time?
Sure. That's a great question, Lori. So the coming off of the 2016 vintage, where we had basically drought-like conditions, we had a California-like growing season in 16, and we were a little concerned with whether the vines were somewhat drought-stressed going into winter and how they would overwinter. So we're kind of pleasantly surprised in early spring of 17. We saw nice uniform bud breaks. We've laid down the fruiting canes. We've pruned each vine back to a target number of buds. We've laid those fruiting canes down on our training wires and our trellis. And in early spring, we begin to see the emerging shoots coming out. So we can look at a cane, say a cane has 15 buds on it. I'm trying to get into screen here. So a 15 bud long cane. And if every one of those buds breaks with a new emerging shoot, that's a great even bud break. So we did see that. Okay, it's going to be, we have the potential for a crop. We don't always see that. Sometimes we see very uneven bud breaks. So there'll be a lot of blank buds. But in 17, we saw a nice bud break. So that kind of allayed our fears that the drought really didn't have any overlasting effects on the vineyard. And then it began to rain, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained. And it really rained the whole spring and early summer. And it was a little depressing and a little concerning for us, because we began to estimate crop levels that were out there, and we saw that we were at normal or slightly above normal. And we begin to look at growing degree days as the season goes on. So this is a long answer to your question, Lori, but I'm getting there.
Hang with it.
So
pour another glass. We'll get
we start to measure growing degree days. Cornell keeps track of growing degree days. It's a measure of heat units, and we were definitely lagging the long-term average. So you don't want to be behind the average. If you're ahead of the average and you're collecting extra heat units, you think you're a little above the curve. We were a little behind that year. And with all that rain, it just made canopy management extremely difficult, because the vines were growing. We had to put the leaves somewhere. We did that divided canopy. We pulled the leaves in the fruiting zone to try to get the clusters open, get the sun shining on them, get them to dry out quickly. And it was definitely a struggle. So going into harvest, like late August, we were definitely concerned about the vintage in general. But then we got September and October, and they may have been the best September and October we've ever had. It was phenomenal weather. We got our summer, only we got it in the fall. And everything got ripe. Everything got super ripe. and it made for us, it's really a great vintage for us. And so we never give up on a vintage. We do everything possible to give those vines the best potential to get ripe. So being estate bottled, as we get past veraison, when the berries start to soften, we'll start to take berry samples from each particular block of Riesling we have. Take a couple hundred berries, we bring them in the lab, we'll crush the grapes, we get a juice sample, and then the winemaking team will analyze the juice sample for acidity, pH, and Brix, which is a measure of sugar. So we'll start sampling when the grapes are about 15 Brix, just to kind of get a benchmark of where we're at. So then as we begin to take, early on, we'll take samples every 4 or 5 days. As we get closer to harvest, we begin to sample every couple days. So first, we need the chemistry to be where we need it to make wine out of it. So we're looking at those 3 numbers. We got to get them in a range that we can make wine out of. So that's the first step. We get the acidity down to where we want it, work with it. We look at the pH, and we get the Brix up, so we have the potential to produce a certain amount of alcohol in the wine. When we get to that point, then we begin to look at a lot of different factors. And for us, we think it's probably one of our best strengths as an estate bottled winery is we can pick whatever day we determine. If it's the middle of the night on a Sunday night and we say this is going to be our best potential to make that wine, that's when we're going to pick them. So we begin to, as we know that the chemistry is good on the juice, we begin to chew on the berries. We begin to grind the skins up in our teeth and really see what kind of flavors are in those skins. We'll look at seed color. So when you open a berry up, there's seeds inside the grape. So those seeds will go through a maturation process. They will be green when the fruit is not completely ripe, and they will turn brown when they are ripe. So that's a great indicator that we're getting close to go time.
We're getting close.
We're getting close.
We're getting close.
Yeah. So and then we're constantly looking at the weather. Yeah. If we get something where we think, okay, this is 98% as good as we can get this, and we look at the weather and we've got 4 inches of rain coming up the coast in a hurricane, we might decide we've got to pick because we're there, and after this rain, we see a bunch of cool weather following it. We don't ever think we can get back to this point. But then again, sometimes we see a ½ inch of rain coming. We say, well, we're going to weather the storm. We feel we've got some warmer weather following this rain. We think we can get this fruit even riper. So we're kind of weighing all these factors in there: the weather, seed color, the flavors. Kind of one of my final checks, as I alluded to earlier, was actually taking the fruiting wire where the clusters of fruit are hanging, and you can shake it. And if you shake it like this, you won't lose it. But if you shake it like this and you get berries rattling off the clusters, you know that they're physiologically, they're ready to come off the cluster. And it really makes for easy picking at that point, because we can go through with our machine and very gently shake the canopy, and the berries come off. And really that's a long answer to when we know it's go time, but we don't schedule our picking out 10 days in advance. Never do. People say, well, when are you going to pick this? We're like, well, we'll know about a half an hour before we pick it, because we're looking every single day. And sometimes we sit idle here in the winery with our equipment because the next variety hasn't ripened yet. So we're not picking when it's convenient to pick. We're picking when we feel that the grapes are at the peak of ripeness. Yeah,
so it's not the romanticized version you might see in a movie where someone just walks out and like, today's the day. There's quite a bit that goes on.
It's not for the faint of heart. I mean, a lot of people have jumped into the grape business and the wine business thinking this was all we did right here, and it's not.
It's what I do.
It's what, yeah.
But no, it's excellent. And thank you for the question. Thank you for the questions that are coming in. Thank you to commenters like Joan, who just bought some Vintners Riesling as well. As we kind of reset, we're half hour in so far. And once again, I'm Alex, it's John, and we're here for as long as you need us here to talk a little bit about Wagner Wine. Also want to talk a little bit about the current situation, self-isolation tips. What are you guys doing to stay occupied, to stay busy? As John went and talked about, there's a lot going on still here as we start to get ready to ramp back up to what we hope is going to be a full-fledged summer here at the winery and in the Finger Lakes in general. But want to get to another question here that came through from Marge, wondering about aging, specifically this 2017 Dry Riesling. How long do you kind of, it's different. The wine will always be different as you go about, but how do you assess ageability with a wine such as this? When do you start to come up with an idea of when it might peak and when, you're going to know you need to drink it by?
Yeah. So we know, we surmise going into bottling the quality of the vintage. And I mean, we're still learning the ageability of Riesling. We feel with the Stelvin closure, we really have extended that. Our library is becoming more extensive on older Rieslings now, so we're constantly opening them up. And we do find some vintages that are 10 or 12 years old that are amazing. And we can find some that are 10 years old that have gone beyond their peak, and they're still very drinkable, but a lot of the fruit, the beautiful fruit that you get out of Riesling, is kind of faded a little bit. So you get more of the alcohol in there. So we like to not squirrel away 5 cases of something for 15 years and never sample it. We suggest if people if they bought a case, on some of our special events here at the winery, we'll taste library vintages. So we have a lot of people that have stored some wine at home and they have aged Rieslings, and they'll come in and they're able to taste and see from our tasting bottle how their Riesling is aging at home, and really judge, hey, is it time to open this? If you have multiple bottles, I would suggest opening one every year or two and kind of, maybe take some notes for you guys that are more serious about Rieslings and see how they're developing, because you can really be rewarded for hanging on to a Riesling for years if you can. It's tough around my house because it's too good to hang on to it. But if you do hang on to them, they really can develop in the bottle. And I will caution you, a lot depends on the quality of closure of the brand of wine you're getting. If it's a quality cork and it's stored right, you're probably in good shape. There are some closures out there. I'm not going to throw any closure under the bus, but there's some closures that don't have good ageability. They're meant for wines that are sold and consumed within a year, and they do let a lot more oxygen transfer through the closure, and oxygen getting into your wine will age it a lot faster than it would if you've got it in a Stelvin or a quality cork closure. So make sure you're storing your wine at an even temperature. Wine does not like to fluctuate warm, cold. If you've got something near cellar temperature, that's ideal. If you've got a cork in your wine, then make sure that it's stored so that the cork is staying hydrated, and that swells the cork up and makes it a little tighter for a seal on the wine. If you have a Stelvin, it doesn't matter if it's right side up or on its side for storing purposes.
And the other thing with cork is humidity. Also, you got to make sure, these caves in France are just, they get to have these perfect conditions for storing wine where the humidity is always at 60, 70%. For myself personally, some of the reds with corks that I'm hoping to save for 10, 15 years, you can buy a meter, pretty cheap digital that will not only check the temperature, but also will check humidity and tell you what the fluctuation was, what the high is, what the low is. With a Stelvin, luckily, as you mentioned, John, you really only have to worry about the temperature. And even then, you're talking about 5+ years of storage. Obviously, extreme temperatures are going to ruin wine no matter what. But, a wine such as the 2017, you talk about the acidity that we got from the growing season, it's going to have some legs, and it's going to go for a while.
Yeah, it sure is. And then, that library that we are keeping of some of these more promising vintages, our wine club has exclusivity to that wine library. So that is one of the things that we really tout become an OCC Octagon Cellars Club member, and you'll have exclusive access to some of these older vintages that we personally have decided have aging potential, and we are selling them for you. So we feel this has got a lot of age left in it. It's certainly not getting tired by any means. It's one of my favorite drinking wines right now. Picking a favorite wine when we make so many here at the winery is like it's a tough choice. It's like picking your favorite kid. And so different occasions, I like different wines, but certainly the 17 Dry has been a go-to wine with dinner.
And Denise asking about Delaware. She had Delaware at a wedding, wants to know if we still make that. We do. We're not turning our back yet on Delaware.
We're one of the few producers that still make it. It's we have 2 acres of it. It's a very old native variety, very distinctive flavors. Was used by Gold Seal for many years to make sparkling wine. So it's got a very distinctive flavor, and we do make a little bit of it, and the people definitely enjoy it.
Casey's saying says he knows Iron's your favorite, but we won't. Right. Casey had also asked, of course, when the first virtual pub night's going to be. Now, we did announce that schedule. It does start May 22nd, our outdoor concert series, May 22nd, running every Friday until Labor Day. We're still holding out hope. We still think, at least, no matter what, hopefully we'll get in on the summer, but we'll see where we're at in a couple weeks in terms of how May's going to look.
It's a very strange feeling here around the winery because, like I said, we've been open for over 40 years and only close Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's every year. 3 days out of the year we're closed. So, I mean, for the last 3 weeks, it's we are open for wine pickup, but no tastings. So our tasting room is just it's really feels strange to not have people laughing and learning and tasting. And so we certainly hope things can get back to more normal soon. We're doing our part to be responsible. We're trying to keep our distance here. We certainly we have some staff that's chosen to stay at home. We have some other staff. Some people are working on some building projects. We're full speed ahead out in the vineyard. Have full crew in the vineyard. We have our full production crew in the winery. So we're stockpiling a lot of beautiful wines. We're really thankful to everybody that's been supporting us. We're doing some online specials right now, trying to make sure people, if they're running low on wines and they know they can't get here for a tasting or they're told not to travel, we'll get the wine to you. And it's tough times, and we're really taking it serious. We keeping our fingers crossed that we can be open and seeing people soon, but we'll see.
Yeah, and again, thank you for everyone who has been supporting us and all the wineries here in the Finger Lakes, because it is not easy time for anyone, and anyone who might be hesitant a little bit. We've been hearing a lot of stories about how quickly shipping has been getting out. Our wine, if you're inside the state, has been getting there less than 24 hours shipping from when you ordered to when it's out for delivery to your house. So, we're still chugging along here. We, as you can see behind us, we've got plenty of bottles. We got the wine. So definitely want to come on and get an order. And love what everyone's been commenting about some of their self-isolation tips so far. You been watching any shows on Netflix or anything like that?
Not so much.
Self-isolating out in the vineyard a little bit more.
Not so much lately, but no, it's just trying to get as many projects done as we can. For us, it's a tough time to tackle building projects in the building when we have people every day, and so we're able to tear into some bigger projects here than we have been able to before. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there you go. One question I wanted to talk about, blending. You mentioned a lot about, different clones of Riesling. Certainly different blocks are going to grow, ripen at different levels, different amounts of sunshine. What is that process like? And, between yourself and our co-winemakers, that back and forth and finding, okay, how are we best expressing the vineyard? How are we best expressing Wagner? What's that process like blending Riesling such as this?
Sure, that's a good question. So
Thank you.
We go into harvest looking at what we have in inventory for bottled wine of past vintages, and we put together a projection for how many cases of a particular wine we want to make. Dry Riesling, we're going to make X. Semi-dry, we're going to make Y. From that list, we determine how many tons of fruit that we need to harvest from our farm for that particular wine. So if we know we're going to make a semi-sweet Riesling like our Riesling Select, we may harvest a block with a little higher acidity and bring that in and kind of have that tank earmarked for that particular wine. Whereas on the dry side, we may be looking to drop that acidity and really let it hang as long as possible and get the acidity down, because in a sweeter wine, obviously the extra sugar can balance that extra acidity. In a drier wine, you don't want a high acid grape or high acid juice coming in. So we harvest with the best intentions for how many tons of a particular block and a particular ripeness of fruit we want to bring in for that wine. So we may end up with 12 to 15 different lots of Riesling in our winery after harvest, which is kind of incomprehensible. That's a lot of tanks. So it's a lot of tanks devoted to one variety. But going back to how I talked about 40 years ago, we had one Riesling vineyard. So we might have 3 tanks going then. So now we have a lot more flexibility, a lot more tools. So we harvest Riesling over the course from mid-October to late October. We have on different pick days, we can get different flavors out of the grapes. So some of the early season may have some different characteristics than some of the stuff that hung later. So we harvest each of our vineyards separately. We vinify them separately. So they are inoculated with yeast. We use many different yeasts throughout those different lots, and they're fermented in their own individual tank. So at the end of that fermentation process, we may have 10 to 12 tanks of Riesling. And then once we've settled some of those and done some rough filtrations on there, we'll actually do a pretty fun day. We taste every single tank of Riesling that we have in the winery from this vintage. So we just did that a couple of weeks ago.
That's right.
We're very fortunate. We've got some of my retired winemakers that still like to stay involved in the process. So we actually had 4 winemakers in the room from Wagner Vineyards during that tasting, as well as many of the rest of us were in on that as well. So a lot of expertise. We've got a lot of loyalty from many loyal employees. Ann Raffetto was the head winemaker for the 2017 vintage, and she's got just a great nose for wines. She's got great experience. She has a super palate, and she's a stickler on yeast health. So we really come in, as I said before, we do experiment with some different yeasts, and when we taste those different tank samples, it's amazing the range of flavors that we can get. And I think for you, it was one of the first times you tasted like raw wine that wasn't ready finished for bottling, but it's very interesting the range of flavors that you can get out of one variety of grape, and that's why we love Riesling. It's just so versatile, and we produce a lot of wines out of one variety. They are not all sweet. Riesling can be bone dry, and so it's quite a process.
Yeah, and like as you mentioned, I was lucky enough to be a part of that tasting, and it's one of those moments. It's my first time tasting with Ann as well. So I make all my notes in terms, I'm trying to get a nose on the palate. When am I tasting? I write down all these things, and then Ann shares her notes, and then I just cross out mine really well.
Everybody tastes different things, and that's one of the things I've learned over the years. And different people can pick up different flavors out of things. And sometimes we'll mention, hey, I'm getting a little bit of citrus, or I get a little green apple out of this, and other people will go, oh, okay, I get that. I'm seeing where you're getting that from. And then somebody will say, I'm getting apricot or peach, and so sometimes we can all get on the same page, and other times certain people are definitely more receptive to certain flavors or aromas. You'll see I'm smelling this wine a lot, and we've had it in the glass for over half an hour here, and it's just every time I go back, I'm picking up more out of it. And sometimes people pour a glass of wine and they start drinking it right away, and it can open up in the glass. And it's a fun experiment to just go back and smell it 45 minutes later and see, you may get something completely different out of it. I often like to, I'll taste a Riesling or have it with my dinner, and then I'll leave a half bottle, and I'll have some out of the half bottle the next day. I'll have a glass with my dinner the next day, and just to see how that wine changes. And that's actually one of the little tricks I use to see how it's going to age over many years, is I'll see how a half bottle ages over 1 or 2 or 3 nights.
Once the oxygen's getting
because you've got, like here, we've got a half bottle. So if you leave this overnight, you've got a lot of oxygen that's touching the wine, and you can really get an idea of how it will age, aging potential of a wine that you may sell it.
More willpower than me if you're leaving half a bottle of wine overnight, but hey, you do what you can. Great question from Dave coming through, just asking about new projects, new things we might be trying. Even throws out the idea if we consider doing a port. Is there anything that's percolating up there in that brain of yours, or just maybe how do you start to approach a new project like that?
Yeah. So good question. We actually made a port in '79, and I still get customers that come in and ask about that port. So
port lasts 200 years, we could probably dig that back out.
So we've kind of been trying to focus a little bit, and for a number of years, the winery we try to do everything. We wanted any wine style that came along, and we really have begun to realize the potential that certain varieties have, and try to focus our efforts onto those varieties and do a world-class job of them. We do continue to make some of those obscure varietals. We make them in much smaller quantities. We've got a customer base that really enjoys them. But what we've expanded on has really been Riesling. And it is something that we feel we can do as well or better than anybody in the world. And we've really put a lot of effort into it. On the red side, we are really seeing the potential for Cabernet Franc. We grow Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Merlot. And our Meritage blend is the 3 Bordeaux Reds. But the Cabernet Franc, we've recently doubled our acreage, and we are about to double it again this spring. So we're doubling down on that, and we feel that's going to be the signature red variety of the Finger Lakes. So probably not a port coming down the road anytime too soon. There's a lot of wineries in the Finger Lakes that are doing that style, and enjoy theirs. But I think what you're going to see from us is a continuing to focus on what we feel we can do best, and not try to be making every single wine for every different style. Speaking about the Cabernet Franc, we now make a dry rosé of Cabernet Franc. We
saw a comment earlier from someone who really enjoys it.
Oh, nice.
I'm with you on that one.
We made a dry rosé 20 years ago out of Pinot Noir. We all loved it, but it was before they were in vogue and caught on, and it didn't sell.
Yeah, Sideways was still 5 years out.
Yeah, so now for the last 5 or 6 years, we've made the dry rosé out of Cabernet Franc. We love it. It's been an extremely popular style. Pairs well with a lot of food, nice crisp acidity. It's really super summer wine. So,
and another plug for the OCC member club is that the 2019 Rosé will be a new release in that shipment as well. So you actually get 2 new releases coming there, the 2018 semi-dry and the 2019 dry Rosé. Coming up soon on an hour here, so I'm just curious if anyone else has any other questions that you want to get in. Please put those in the chat right now. Let us know what you think about this style, what you think about this show so far. Have you enjoyed it? And what else would you like to see? Gonna have a little bit of time on our hands, it's looking like, for a couple more weeks. So we're hoping that we can talk a little bit more about some other wines that we're going to have available. Love to bring John back up here, a couple winemakers as well. So there is no shortage of wine brains here and wine lovers here. Really good question from Richard was actually going to be the question that I posed you. 2019, that vintage, how did that look for reds? The question was for reds in particular, but what was the 2019 vintage like? How's 2020 starting to look so far?
Yeah, so 19 we feel has got pretty good red potential. We did harvest Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and Cabernet Sauvignon for a potential Meritage blend. Our last Meritage that we put in the bottle is 2016. So we're constantly looking for when we can get the Bordeaux Red super ripe and make our next Meritage. We've only made the Meritage 5 times in the last 15 years. So we really are choosy on what goes in the bottle under that. But pretty happy with what we harvested on the white side for 19. We employed a lot of the same techniques that we talked about to overcome some of the hurdles we had. We just extended hang time, super exposed fruit to get sun on them, really taking care of that canopy. That canopy is the solar collector for the vine, and it's got to be healthy and functioning late in the season in order to ripen fruit. So a ton of handwork out there to really push the ripeness. But yeah, we're bullish about those 19s. Like I said, we tasted them out of the tank a couple of weeks ago. And now the winemakers will begin to put together the blends. And Alex asked me earlier about the blends. And what we normally do is we have a single vineyard, Kaywood East Riesling, that's extremely dry, that comes from one vineyard on our farm, a very historic site that my father and my grandfather grew grapes on. Very steep, difficult to farm, but very distinctive fruit. So typically we will put together the Kaywood East first because we have the fewest components to work with, and we got to make sure we get that one right. Second, we'll put together our classic dry. So we can draw from all of our vineyards. We have, like I said, 6 vineyards on our farm, and really put together our best dry. And then the semi-dry and the select Riesling, they do come a little easier for us because like I say, with a little sugar, it rounds out the mouthfeel, and really you get a lot more of the peach and the nectarine comes out. Some of the dry, the Kaywood East is really dry, and it's laser focused, and it's a lot more minerality in there. You'll get some of the minerality in the dry. You get some nice, I get lime, I get green apple in here. It's just beautiful. And what I don't like is I don't like to pick up a bottle of dry Riesling if I'm out and about and taste it and just have lemon water, just have nothing. And really,
it's the one where you really feel it in the jaws.
Yeah, we really strive to. I mean, we're celebrating the Riesling character, that varietal character, because it's lush, it's wonderful. And with these dry wines, even with all that flavor, they still pair well with food. And like I say, we're big proponents of wine with food. So yeah, I'd like to thank everybody that's with us tonight, and I hope you're enjoying the wine. And it's been fun. We weren't quite sure how this would work out, but it's not quite the same as having everybody bellied up to the bar and asking questions. But we had a lot of events and things scheduled for the next coming weeks and months. We had a Riesling camp where we're going to bring a bunch of campers up here for 3 or 4 days and really delve into Riesling, take them out in the vineyard, show them exactly what we're doing there, get their hands dirty, have them in the winery. We had a Riesling roadshow that we're going to do through the Finger Lakes Wine Alliance, where we're going to take our Rieslings and bring them to a city near you, and really taste them and talk about them, educate people. Unfortunately, all of those events are postponed to a later date, and we hope to revisit them as soon as things get back to more of a normal keel here. But we're doing our best, and like I say, we'll do more of these. If you guys think you're finding value in them, we can talk about a different wine. We can revisit some of the things that make us unique as a winery here at Wagner's. Some of the philosophies we have about growing grapes and making wine as a family. So we're here. If you guys still have questions, we'll stay on. Let us know.
Yeah. And the great thing about these videos, this will stay on our Facebook page even after the live feed is done. So you can always come back and revisit, share it with friends who you think would like that. All those friends who say they don't like Riesling because it's always sweet and things like that. It's just a great discussion up and down in terms of pairing and everything. For those a couple of people were talking about the Meritage and how much they enjoy that. Limited production on the 2016 Meritage. So if you want a bottle, you want several bottles, you want to hold on to them for a little bit, get those orders in soon. We're not down to like 10 bottles or anything, but the case number, certainly compared to the 2012 is lower. So a little bit more of an exclusive wine there. So we definitely want to encourage you to plan ahead when it comes to wine drinking. I think that's it's tough right now in these past couple of weeks. It's hard to plan ahead, but we're making do. And those events that John mentioned, other events here at the winery, we will fit those in as best we can when we can. I think that's the main takeaway, is that we're every day we're itching to find a way to reach you guys right now, but then also to make sure when we're able to welcome people back into our tasting rooms that it's going to be the best overall experience. There's some projects that we're really excited that when those are finished, it's really going to look nice. If you've been in recently, you might have seen the new video panels in the walkway on the way to the tasting room. Another way to help tell the story before you taste the wine. We're going to have some great things for after you taste the wine as well. Just reading through some of the comments here to make sure if anyone had a question. Let's see.
Our cafe is currently closed until we get directive from New York State that we're able to open that back up again. We're working on a bunch of projects over there. We've got a new solar awning on there. If you haven't been there, that was up last year. New railings on the deck. It looks gorgeous. We're working on a lawn improvement project. We're reseeding about an acre of our property to new grass. It's going to be super for out in front of where we have wedding receptions. We are tackling a project that we haven't really talked about a whole lot yet, but in our octagon cellar that's actually below right where Alex and I are sitting. So that's how we came up with the name for Octagon Cellars Club. We are constructing an exclusive tasting area down in the cellar. Mike Jondre's been working on that diligently for several weeks now. We've got new lighting in there. We are going to share the space with the winemakers. They're not too happy about giving up some barrel space, but it's been a fun project. So there are full barrels along both walls of the cellar, and we've got new lighting, new ceiling, new radiant heat panels that we can heat objects, so we can go down there and have a tasting for half an hour and not feel cool in the cellar, and yet still not heat the cellar up. So we don't want to. The beauty behind the cellar in this building is it maintains a fairly constant temperature.
Not trying to make mead.
Yeah, so that temperature is about 55-ish, maybe up to high 50s. So a little too cool maybe for a long extended tasting, but the panels will just take the chill off. So we're really looking forward to that. Nice quiet space where we can figure out how to use that space best to do some private tastings and really drill down into some of the details for some of the people that really love these vinifera wines and want to learn more about them and what makes us tick. So that'll be, we were going to open that for a Seneca Lake Wine Trail event, Flights and Bites, that was in May, and that's been postponed, but we're very hopeful that that will resume soon. So we'll keep you in the loop as to the details that we know about that. But looking forward to seeing people again and really getting back to normal if we can ever get there.
Exactly. Well, thank you to John for taking the time here to talk. As I'm sure you guys all noticed, like he's more than willing to talk a little bit about what's going on here at Wagner, and that's what makes this place so great, is the effort and that family atmosphere. Everyone here is working toward that same common goal. We'll let you know when we're going to have one of these, potentially as soon as next Friday. Again, we'll take a look at what else we might want to talk about and what else we might want to do. Like I said, leave your comments there even after the stream is done in terms of what you might like to see. Make sure you're following us also on Instagram and Twitter as well. We're going to continue to let everybody know not only latest updates in terms of events and operations here, but then also just sharing some behind the scenes things of what is going on during this time, and help you transport yourself into our vineyards as you're sitting at home self-isolating, which keep that space, continue to work at that, continue to stay safe as well. We'll be here when the time is right. So until that time,
we've been also trying to share some photos and videos of what we're doing in the vineyard to kind of keep you guys in the loop a little bit more on what's going on out there. We kind of take it for granted because we see it every day, but we're realizing that a lot of people are interested in what's going on out there.
It's a pretty nice view.
And so, yeah, we're trying to share a lot more of that on social media so that you can see what we're doing, and kind of, you don't have to necessarily be out there trimming 10-hour days with us, but you can see what it's like.
Exactly. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning in, and we will let you know as soon as we can when the next one's coming. Yep, raise a glass.
Cheers.
Can't clink them, but we'll raise a glass 6 feet apart. Everyone take care, stay safe, and we will see you next time.